The castle floated in silence, high above a broken land where no birds sang and no rivers flowed. Its towers were wrapped in vines of silver thorns, glowing faintly under a sky that never changed. Dust covered the golden halls, and mirrors reflected nothing but darkness. Inside, the royal court stood frozen in time, each figure trapped mid-motion, a knight reaching for his sword, a maid holding a tray, a king with his crown halfway raised. None of them breathed. None of them aged. At the very heart of the castle lay the princess. She rested on a bed of glass, her face calm, her hands folded, her golden hair shining even in the gloom. She looked as if she were only sleeping, but she had slept for far too long. This was no normal dream. It was a lock, a seal, and a warning all at once. For deep inside her slumber, she carried whispers of a power once lost, of a spell stronger than kingdoms, of a curse that reached far beyond her walls. The air around her seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the day her eyes would open again. Outside the castle, shadows crept. They were not animals, nor men. They moved like smoke, crawling over the stones, circling the gates, never daring to enter. They had waited as centuries passed. They had grown patient. Whatever kept the princess asleep kept them out as well. But nothing lasts forever. The ruined kingdom below told its own story. Villages lay in ash. Forests stood black and lifeless. The rivers that once sparkled were now nothing more than scars of dry stone. People still spoke of the princess in whispers, not as a fairy tale but as a warning. "Do not go near the floating castle," they said. "Do not wake what sleeps within." Yet no one knew why she still slept. Was it the curse of a single prick on a spindle? Or had something far darker sealed her fate? Some said she was trapped because the world itself was not ready for her return. Others claimed she held a secret so powerful that if she opened her eyes, everything would change. And so the castle drifted in silence. Time did not touch it. Generations came and went, but the princess remained untouched, her chest rising and falling with the faintest breath. Far away, storms began to gather. Strange lights danced in the night sky. The earth shook as if something ancient stirred beneath it. The shadows outside the castle pressed closer, their whispers echoing against the golden walls. The question no one could answer was this: when the princess wakes, will she bring hope or ruin? Centuries rolled by, and the kingdom below the floating castle faded from memory. What was once a land of music, light, and harvest became nothing more than a shadow in old tales. People told stories by firelight, warning children not to wander too close to the silent sky castle. Travelers avoided the cursed land. Roads that once led to the royal city were swallowed by weeds and broken stone. Caravans turned back at the borders, whispering of strange shapes in the mist. No map dared to mark the place anymore. It was as if the earth itself wanted to erase the memory. And yet, the castle remained. Its towers stood sharp against the horizon, its walls glowing faintly in the pale light of the sky. Unlike the villages below, it did not rot. Unlike the forests, it did not burn. It was as if time itself refused to touch it. From far away, it looked like a jewel in the clouds, beautiful, silent, and terrible. Stories grew with each passing generation. Some believed the princess's sleep was a blessing. "If she wakes," they whispered, "something worse will follow." Others believed she was the last hope of the kingdom, and that her slumber held back the ruin outside. There were those who claimed to hear voices near the castle walls. A song, they said, soft and sad, drifting from the windows. Some said it was the princess herself, dreaming out loud. Others swore it was the curse speaking through her, warning all who dared to listen. Fear spread faster than truth. People said that the shadows guarding the castle grew bolder with each century. They moved like watchmen, keeping intruders away. Many who entered never returned. Those who did came back pale, their eyes hollow, muttering words no one could understand. Still, some dared to believe. Old books spoke of a prophecy, that one day, when the kingdom was at its weakest, the princess would rise. Her breath would stir, the sleeping halls, her eyes would open, and the curse would break. But the same books also carried a darker warning. When beauty wakes, so will the darkness. Generations later, no one knew which story was true. But one thing remained certain. The floating castle was not empty. Something inside waited. Something outside watched. And far beyond the cursed land, whispers began again. Rumors traveled from city to city, carried by merchants, sailors, and wandering bards. Each tale was different, but all ended with the same fearful truth. The princess still sleeps, but the castle was not alone. Hidden in the broken forests and the ruined hills, figures watched. They moved like shadows, silent and patient, their eyes always fixed on the floating fortress above. To the frightened villagers who glimpsed them, they were ghosts or monsters. But in truth, they were something else entirely. They were the Watchers. Long ago, they had been men and women of the kingdom, warriors forged in the last war before the fall. When the curse struck and the land withered, they did not flee. Instead, they swore an oath, to guard the castle, to keep strangers away, and to make sure no hand disturbed the princess's slumber. Time changed them. Centuries of silence carved their bodies into pale, sharp shapes. Their voices became whispers. Their faces, hidden by dark veils and ancient masks, carried no trace of youth or age. No one knew how they survived. Some said the curse itself kept them alive. Others claimed they drank from wells of forgotten magic buried in the ruins. Whatever the truth, they endured, never breaking their watch. The Watchers spoke rarely, but when they did, their words carried weight. Around their fireless camps, they whispered to one another, "Her sleep is not punishment. It is the shield." They told and retold the story of the day the castle sealed itself. They remembered the trembling earth, the sky splitting open, the shadows pouring in like rivers of smoke. And they remembered how, when the princess's eyes closed, the darkness stopped at the gates. The curse was not just hers. It was the wall between the world and something worse. And so they waited. Travelers who tried to climb the hills were turned back. Some were warned, others vanished without a sound. A few were found days later, asleep beneath the trees, unable to wake. The Watchers left them there, untouched, as if reminding the world, this land is forbidden. Even among themselves, the Watchers did not always agree. Some feared the day the princess might rise. "If she wakes, the shield breaks," they murmured. Others believed her awakening was the only hope. "If she does not wake, the shield will one day fail on its own." The castle floated above them, untouched by storms or time, a silent crown over a ruined land. Its windows glowed faintly at night, though no fire burned within. Some of the Watchers swore they had seen figures moving inside, shadows pacing in empty halls, waiting as they waited. And through the endless centuries, one truth weighed heavier than all others. The curse did not only bind the princess, it bound what lay beyond her dreams. For ages, no one dared to step beyond the cursed land. But all silence ends. One day, a band of outsiders appeared at the kingdom's edge. They came with maps, machines, and weapons gleaming in the sun. Their boots crushed the dry earth as they marched forward, their voices loud where all others had whispered. Some were scholars, drawn by the promise of lost magic. Others were soldiers, sent to claim what power still slept. A few were treasure hunters, greedy for gold said to be hidden in the silent halls. They laughed at the stories. Old fairy tales, they said, superstitions to scare children. The warnings carved into stone at the border, the strange bones half buried in the dirt, the eerie silence of the birds, none of it slowed them. They wanted answers, and they wanted them now. The watchers saw them first. From the shadows of ruined towers, their pale eyes glimmered. They whispered among themselves, their voices rustling like dry leaves. Fools. They do not know. For centuries, they had turned back wanderers. But this group was different. They carried fire, steel, and the pride of those who believed no curse could touch them. The outsiders pushed deeper. They passed broken villages where doors hung open like mouths frozen in screams. They walked through forests of dead trees, their branches clawing the sky. The air grew colder with each step, the light dimmer, as if the land itself resisted them. Still, they pressed on. By the time they reached the base of the floating castle, the air felt heavy. The walls towered above them, glowing faintly, as if lit by a sun that no longer shone. The outsiders raised their lights, their ropes, their climbing hooks. "We'll go inside," they said. "We'll see what sleeps." But the castle had already felt them. Deep within its silent halls, dust stirred. A mirror cracked, though no hand touched it. The frozen court shifted. Ted, their faces almost twitching, as though the long sleep was uneasy. And at the very center, the princess's chest rose with a deeper breath than before. Her fingers trembled. Her dream began to change. Outside, the watchers gathered, their cloaks fluttering in the cold wind. For the first time in centuries, they moved closer to the castle walls. They hissed warnings into the night. But the outsiders did not listen. And as the first intruder's hand touched the golden gate, the silence broke. Inside the glass chamber, the princess stirred. For the first time in centuries, her still hands twitched against the folds of her gown. Her lips parted, pulling in a breath that was deeper, sharper than before. The silence around her bent, as if the air itself leaned closer. Dust lifted from the floor, floating like ash in the glow of her bed. Her dreams, once calm, turned restless. She whispered words no one could hear, fragments of forgotten names and broken prayers. The golden vines wrapped around the castle walls pulsed faintly, as though alive, their thorns glimmering like beating hearts. Outside, the intruders cheered. "It's working!" one of them shouted. They believed their arrival, their strength, their clever tools had begun to crack the spell. "We are breaking the curse," they said, their voices loud with triumph. But the watchers knew better. From the shadows they watched with faces tight beneath their masks. Their whispers grew urgent. Not the curse. The seal. They had sworn to guard the castle, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. They remembered the night the kingdom had fallen. They remembered the sky bleeding with fire, the earth splitting with shadows, and how the princess's sleep had shut it all away. Her slumber was not punishment. It was protection. Now, with every breath she drew, the balance trembled. The outsiders pressed harder. They pushed at the gates, lit fires to melt the golden vines, and struck the walls with iron tools. Each strike sent echoes through the castle halls, rattling mirrors, shaking chandeliers, stirring the frozen court. The knights frozen in mid-step seemed almost to sway, as though they might wake too. The watchers stepped forward at last. Cloaked in black, their voices hissed into the cold wind. "Leave this place. You do not know what you awaken." But the intruders laughed. "Guardians of superstition," they mocked. "You've kept this power to yourselves for too long." They lifted their weapons and torches high, ready to climb. Inside, the princess's eyes shifted beneath her lids. A tear slipped down her cheek, though no sorrow had touched her. Her chest rose faster now, her heartbeat faint, but quickening. And with each tremor of life, the castle changed. Cracks spread across the frozen floor. The chandeliers swung on their chains, though no wind stirred. Far below, the kingdom's ruins groaned, as though the earth itself feared what was coming. The truth was rising to the surface at last. Her sleep had not been meant to save her. It had been meant to save the world. The castle shivered, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. The outsiders pressed forward, certain they stood on the edge of victory. To them, this was treasure waiting to be claimed, a spell to shatter, a princess to free, a kingdom's secret to own. But the watchers felt the change in the air. Their cloaks rippled though no wind blew, and their whispers grew like a storm. It wakes. The power beneath. It wakes. Within the glass chamber, the princess trembled. Her fingers curled, her lips moved in broken words, and her hair flowed as if caught in invisible water. Her dreams were not only dreams now, they were spilling outward. Strange lights seeped from the cracks in the floor, crawling up the walls like living fire. The outsiders stared in awe. Magic, one breathed. Ancient magic. They thought they had found the treasure of legends, but this power was not gold to be carried, nor knowledge to be written in books. It was older, wilder, and far more dangerous. The ground shook. Mirrors in the silent halls shattered into dust. The frozen king's crown clattered to the floor, echoing like thunder. And from deep below the castle, a sound rose. A low, hollow hum, like the growl of something vast and hungry. The watchers fell to their knees, pressing their veiled faces to the earth. Shield her. Shield us all, they prayed. For they knew the truth. The princess was not just a sleeper. She was the lock upon a door that should never be opened. As her eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, the first crack appeared in that door. A ripple of darkness spread across the land, dimming the sky, bending the air. Birds fell silent for miles. Rivers paused in their flow. Even the outsiders felt a cold hand press against their hearts, though pride kept them standing. One of them stepped closer to the glass bed, reaching out. "She's waking," he whispered with awe. "She will that cuss." But the watchers hissed as one, their voices sharp as blades. "No, she will not thank you. She will break you." For the hidden power was not hers alone. It belonged to what her dreams had kept away. And now it was stirring. The castle shook as the glass bed split with a sharp crack. Shards scattered across the floor like falling stars, and from them the princess rose. Her steps were unsteady at first, yet her presence filled the chamber with a strange light. Her gown shimmered like woven moonlight, her hair flowed like a golden river, and her eyes, when they opened, were both human and something far beyond. She breathed deeply, each breath stirring the air, as if the castle itself exhaled with her. The centuries of silence were gone. She was awake. The outsiders stood frozen, their greed replaced with awe. "We did it," one whispered. "The princess lives." Another fell to his knees, thinking they had broken a curse and won a prize. But the watchers did not cheer. They lowered their heads, their voices tight with dread. "The lock is broken. The door opens." Beauty's gaze swept the hall. She saw the frozen court, still trapped in half motions. She saw the cracked mirrors, the ruined kingdom beyond the windows, the strangers who had disturbed her rest. And in her heart, she felt the weight of time, centuries lost, generations gone. Her lips trembled as she spoke her first words, her voice soft, yet heavy with sorrow. "How long?" "Too long," whispered a watcher. "The world changed, and now, so must you." But as she took her first full step, the air darkened. A shadow spilled across the floor, crawling from the broken cracks beneath the castle. It rose like smoke, twisting into shapes with no face, no form, yet heavy with hunger. The walls groaned, the chandeliers swung wild, and a low rumble shook the skies. The outsiders stumbled back. "What is that?" The watchers did not answer. They only whispered the truth they had carried for centuries. It wakes with her. For her sleep had not only been her own prison, it had been the seal that held this darkness down. And now, with her awakening, the seal was gone. Beauty's eyes flashed with pain and fire. She understood. Her curse was never meant to punish. It had been meant to protect. She had been the shield, her dreams the wall, her silence the only thing that kept the world safe. Now, awake at last, she stood between two choices: to fight the darkness with the power she barely remembered, or to surrender and let the world be swallowed. The strangers who woke her thought they had freed her, but what they had truly done was summon the battle to come. The darkness spread like a storm, swallowing the golden walls of the castle. The outsiders cried out, their torches flickering uselessly against the shadow. The watchers stood still, as though they had seen this moment before, the end they had sworn to delay. But then, the darkness hesitated. It did not rush toward the strangers. It did not strike the watchers. Instead, it circled Beauty like a crown of smoke, whispering in voices only she could hear. Her eyes widened, for in those whispers, she heard a truth she had never known. This darkness was not her enemy. It was part of her. Her curse, her slumber, the centuries of silence. They had not been placed upon her by some cruel witch or angry fate. No. Long ago, when the kingdom fell to ruin, she herself had chosen it. She had split her own soul in two, light and shadow, binding the darker half beneath her dreams so the world would survive. And now, with her awakening, both halves stood together again. The outsiders gasped as her figure glowed with two colors at once, golden light in her right hand, swirling shadow in her left. Her gown rippled as if woven from both dawn and midnight. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried storms. The watchers fell to their knees. "It was never the curse of another," they whispered. "It was her own choice, her sacrifice." The outsiders, blinded by greed, still reached forward. "That power, it can be ours. Share it with us." But Beauty did not move toward them. Instead, she lifted her hands, and the castle itself seemed to listen. Her voice rang through the trembling halls. "The true battle was never to keep me asleep. It was to keep you safe from what I am." And in that moment, the final twist of her tale was clear. Sleeping Beauty was not only the princess. She was the prison. She was the seal. She was both savior and danger, and her awakening meant the world itself would never be the same again.